Aloha everyone and good morning. Thank you all so much for coming to the Hawaii Environmental Change Agents event. We'll be starting right now at 10:01. My name is Clara Antal and I'm part of the planning committee for this event. And I'm also a member of the Hawaii Youth Climate Coalition. And I'm very grateful that you all are on this call today. I'd like to thank the legislative chairs in attendance today, Senator Gabbard, Representative Lowen, and Representative Tarnas, as well as the participating environmental organizations for their willingness to participate in this process to discuss consensus on these issues. So just to go over our objectives and what we hope to achieve with today's event, this event serves as a beginning of discussion of legislative priorities. So we'd like to say that this isn't necessarily a commitment and we don't want this to be a debate forum, but rather a building of for collaboration and finding commonalities on our priorities. And so now we'll share today's program. First, we'll start with appreciation for some bills from last session. Then we'll introduce the three chairs that we have today. And then we'll have an introduction of our sponsors, which is our participating organizations. And then Senator Gabbard, Representative Lowen, and Representative Tarnas will be presenting their policy priorities and their own slides, as well as, and then following their priorities, we'll have time for a Q&A for the chairs. And then following that, the participating organizations will share their priorities, and then we'll have our closing. So now I'd just like to acknowledge and show appreciation for some bills that have been passed and put into law as of July 1st. House Bill 552 is committed to transitioning state agencies to electric vehicles. House Bill 424 focuses on state agency rental vehicle preferences for electric vehicles. And House Bill 1142 focuses on funding for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So we're very, we want to celebrate all those bills. And of course, there's many others that have been passed in this last session that we're also grateful for. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's event. Ted Bolin is an advocate on environmental issues, especially the climate emergency and coral reef protection. Ted served as a Deputy Attorney General for 15 years until 2021, representing the Hawaii Department of Health and Environmental Council on water and environmental review matters. So now I'll pass it off to Ted.
Thank you, Clara. Getting this meeting together has been a dream of mine for a couple of years. To get the chairs and the environmental groups who are going to be working on legislation together before the session, and not to be suddenly kind of in the throes of the session when it's too late to work together on bills. So I see today as an opportunity for all of us to build consensus in a conversation. I particularly want to thank Clara, who is, for those who don't know, she's a high school student. She's a young person who represents those who have the most at stake in our environmental future. And I think she's doing an amazing job in organizing this. So thank you, Clara.
Thank you, Ted.
Next, I'd like to turn to introducing our speakers, our main speakers today, the three chairs of environmental committees in the legislature. We have Senator Mike Gabbard, who is the chair of the Agriculture and Environment Committee, Representative Nicole Lowen, who is the chair of the Energy Environmental Protection Committee, and Representative David Tarnas, who is the chair of the Water and Land Committee. And let me briefly summarize some information about those three people. Senator Mike Gabbard currently serves as chair of the Committee on Agriculture and Environment. He represents Hawaii's 20th Senatorial District and has served in the Hawaii State Senate since 2006. Senator Gabbard has been instrumental, and I want to thank him, in passing legislation to protect our environment, including coral reefs in the ocean, and he's led efforts to mitigate the existential threats posed by the climate crisis. Among the many successful efforts, in particular, Senator Gabbard has helped to pass, back in 2015, a law establishing Hawaii's renewable portfolio standard goal of 100% renewable power by 2045. In 2016, a law banning the sale in Hawaii of elephant ivory, rhinoceros horn, and other endangered species trafficking. In 2017, a law requiring that cesspools be upgraded by 2050. That's a law we worked on for several years, and he helped to pass it, as did others on this group. In 2018, a law with the world's first ban on the sales of sunscreen containing reef-harming petrochemicals, oxybenzone and octinoxate. Lisa Bishop is on the call today, and she was also instrumental in that, but I want to particularly thank Senator Gabbard and Rep. Lowen for that. And lastly, in 2021, Senator Gabbard helped to pass a concurrent resolution that declared Hawaii was the first state in the nation declaring a climate emergency. So in all these matters, Senator Gabbard has been a leader, and we owe him a debt of gratitude, and I want to give him my personal thanks. Next, I'd like to turn to Senator Nicole Lowen, who, as I said, is the chair of the Energy and Environmental Protection Committee. And Senator Lowen is a state representative for House District 6, representing Kailua Kona, Honolulu, and Kalaloa, I may have mispronounced that, sorry, on Hawaii Island. She is the chair of the House Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection and a member of the Judiciary and the Agriculture Committee. She's the founder of Hawaii's Environmental Legislative Caucus and serves on the Hawaii Climate Change Adaptation and Mitigation Commission, the Hawaii Invasive Species Council, and is appointed to the Electric Advisory Committee of the U.S. Department of Energy. Throughout her 9 years in office, Representative Lowen has worked on legislation to further Hawaii's renewable energy goals, to address climate change, to protect natural resources, and to improve waste management systems. During the 2021 session, Representative Lowen partnered with legislators from 9 other states and the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators in a coordinated effort to introduce extended producer responsibility legislation that would hold producers responsibility for end-of-life management of packaging materials. She's also prioritized work on clean transportation and energy efficiency, and passed bills to transition state fleets to zero-emission vehicles, to incentivize the build-out of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, to study the best practices for disposal, recycling, or secondary use of clean energy products, and to prohibit the release of balloons that end up in the ocean. Now I'd like to turn to Chair David Tarnas of the Water and Land Committee. David Tarnas is currently the state representative for House District 7. That's North Kohala, South Kohala, and North Kona. He previously served as the state representative for Kohala and Kona from 1994 to 1998. David is a professional environmental planner with his own company focused on managing development of private, residential, and commercial projects in environmentally sensitive areas. For more than 2 decades, David has worked as a planner and meeting facilitator on projects in Hawaii to develop harbors, highways, farms, ranches, fish ponds, and forest plantations, as well as scientific research facilities and renewable energy projects. David is co-author of the Hawaii Ocean Resources Management Plan from 1990 and author of the 1998 Act 306 law that created the West Hawaii Regional Fishery Management Area. He introduced a bill this year requiring state agencies with vulnerable facilities to plan for sea level rise, which was enacted into law as Act 178. He has served as a member of the Hawaii County Agriculture Advisory Commission and the Community Advisory Group for the U.S. Army Garrison Hawaii Pohakaloa Training Area, and has been the Hawaii County Chairman of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. So let us all thank those 3 chairs who have been kind enough to appear today and who have done so much good work for the environment in years past, and we hope in 2022. So that's who our speakers are today. Let me now turn to introducing the many environmental groups who have been kind enough to join us today and are a key part of forming consensus on these issues together. So they're the other half of the equation. And let me start with the Sierra Club of Hawaii Island. Chuck Flaherty is introducing this group. I think the Sierra Club, that's a national organization, needs no introduction. Again, this is the Hawaii chapter, and they'll be presenting specific priorities. Next up, Faith Action for Community Equity. Susan Gorman-Chang will present. This is a faith-based voice for protecting natural resources and for environmental justice. And next up, the Nature Conservancy, Anthony Ching. They are a longstanding environmental advocate, I think we all know, especially on endangered species. And they'll be presenting their priorities on that area too. Next up, Blue Planet. Melissa Miyashiro is the incoming executive director. Welcome, Melissa. And they are in favor of 100% clean energy in Hawaii. Next up, Surfrider, Lauren Blickley. They are an activist network nationwide with an active presence here in Hawaii. They are in favor of protecting the ocean, waves, and beaches. Citizens Climate Lobby, Paul Bernstein is presenting. They are an organization devoted toward climate change solutions. And the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, Charlie Ice presenting. He's my co-chair on the Energy and Environmental and Climate Action Committee. And this group speaks broadly on a host of environmental issues with various subcommittees, agriculture, human impacts, climate among them. And the next up is 350 Hawaii. Sherry Pollack will be presenting. She's a co-founder of the organization. This group has been focused on ending fossil fuel use and working for a safe climate future. Next up is the Climate Protectors of Hawaii. Andrea Nandosgar will be presenting for us today. This is a group that is devoted toward finding solutions to the climate emergency. And the next is Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition. Lisa Bishop is presenting. This is a group that formed in 2017, focused on protecting coral reefs and marine life with a particular focus on eliminating reef harming sunscreens in recent years. Next is Our Revolution Hawaii. Dave Mullenix presenting. This is a group that is focused on developing clean energy to combat the climate emergency. And our organizer here, Clara Ontal, with the Hawaii Youth Climate Coalition. This is a group that is determined to develop equitable climate-resistant future. The Hawaii Electric Vehicle Association, Tam Hunt, working on electrifying transportation and expanding electric vehicle infrastructure. The Aina Aloha Economic Futures, Davis Price. You can read the slide there. They are community-based groups representing Hawaiian community, indigenous change makers. Next up for the fishers, Inga Gibson. Protecting coral reefs and their wildlife is the main focus of this group. The Climate Reality Project with Joshua Cooper is focused on catalyzing global solutions for the climate crisis. And Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations, Stuart Coleman. This is a group that is determined to reduce sewage pollution, to work on upgrading cesspools, and to implement innovative, affordable alternatives on wastewater matters. So those are the groups that are presenting today. Thank you all for attending. As I said, this is a dream of mine to get these groups together with the chairs, and this is a wonderful opportunity, a first step today. We have a lot of people on this call, so it's great to see all your faces and great to have you in attendance today. So with those introductions, now I would like to turn to the, I guess I call it the main event, the presentation by the environmental chairs of their priorities. First, we're trying to give them 10 minutes each, and first up is Chair Mike Gabbard, as we've introduced. So I turned it over to Mike, and you see on the screen his main priorities, and turn the microphone over to Chair Gabbard. Thank you very much.
Great, Ted. Mahalo. Aloha mai kako, and I hope you and your ohana are safe and well during these crazy COVID times that we're living in. First, I want to mahalo all of you who were involved in putting the event together. What a great idea. It just makes sense. It makes sense. Inviting all the stakeholders to get together and talk story before session starts. And here we're conveniently doing it online, not having to hassle with flying in from the neighbor islands and paying for parking downstairs at the Capitol. And we're looking at priorities, possible bills for introduction, tweaking bills from previous sessions. So this is really cool, and I'm stoked. I wish we would have started this 12 years ago when I first became chair of the Environment Committee. So laulima, right? Many hands, minds, and hearts working together. So I've been asked to give a brief recap of how I think last session went regarding environmental issues, and then discuss my 3 priorities for the 2022 session. I recently finished my 5th session as the AEN committee chair. I am stoked that we were able to pass 24 ag and environment pieces of legislation in 2021. And of those 24 that passed, 11 were environment related, and there were 5 bills that did not pass. So in short, I think we did pretty good. I won't have time today to go into each of the 11 that passed into law, but I'll highlight one of them. And actually, Ted mentioned it. If you want the full list, you can contact my office and I'll send it out to you. So what first comes to mind for me is Senate Concurrent Resolution, or SCR 44, our climate emergency resolution. This reso was requested by Dave and Sherry Mullenix of 350.org, and as many of you know, it passed with flying colors. And while about 2,000 jurisdictions in 34 countries had declared climate emergency, Hawaii became the first state in the US to do so, which is very important in terms of our state's leadership nationally and internationally on this issue. It reminds me how in 2015, also as Ted mentioned, Hawaii was the first state to pass a 100% clean renewable energy goal by 2045. Since then, 16 states have followed our lead. So hopefully other states will get on board and pass similar legislation to SCR 44 in their respective states. And while resolutions, as many of you know, are not binding legislation, passing this reso gives our community something to rally around and to work toward real actions to mitigate and adapt to climate change. With this reso, we've made a strong statement by declaring a state climate emergency and requesting statewide collaboration among government, business, and community leaders to address the growing climate crisis. But what's so powerful is that by declaring a climate emergency, we make it clear that we're not talking about an abstract future threat, but a crisis that's already here. In other words, there's no more going back to business as usual. And what's also cool is that the reso has been getting traction on the mainland. We've had several people contacting the office to get more information. So I mahalo the efforts of the Hawaii Climate and Environmental Coalition. That was the 37 organizations that came together to help get our climate emergency reso adopted by both the Senate and the House. So as far as my upcoming priorities for 2022, which by the way begins on January 19th. When asked to provide my top 3 priorities, I asked for input from the environmental community and constituents. There were certain issues that came up more often than others. And so these frequently raised issues helped me to formulate my top 3. So here they are. Number 1, the Green Amendment, SB 502. My first priority, it passed unanimously in the Senate last session, but it died in the House. And while this audience is savvy enough to know, the average person might ask, what the hell is a Green Amendment? Green Amendments are provisions added to the Bill of Rights, section of a Constitution, that recognize and protect the rights of all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or income, including future generations, to pure water, clean air, a stable climate, and healthy environments. So SB 502, it would amend our state constitution to protect these rights, and it could be used in cases where those rights are being threatened. Our constitution, it currently protects our environmental rights to some extent, but only as set forth in laws and implemented by agencies. So every person in Hawaii should have inalienable rights to clean water and air, a secure climate, healthy ecosystems, including flora and fauna and soil, and preservation of the cultural qualities of the environment. These rights should be recognized and protected in our Bill of Rights, not dependent on the passage of laws and their proper implementation. So the state and county should protect and not infringe upon these rights. Support for the constitutional right to a clean environment is gaining momentum in other states as other legislatures are beginning to recognize the power in including such basic but strong legal language in a state constitution's Bill of Rights. Hawaii is one of 13 states considering a green amendment. 2 other states, Pennsylvania and Montana, have already adopted green amendments. So these green amendments have been used by residents, township officials, administrative agencies, organizations, and elected officials, including a state attorney general and governor. So if it passes next year with your kokua, the ballot question would appear in the 2022 election cycle. If approved by the legislature and by voters, it would protect such rights for present and future generations. My second priority, as you can see, as we all know, our beaches, reefs, ocean, forest, parks, and other natural resources are part of what makes Hawaii such a special place. And these natural resources provide billions of dollars of value to the state's economy and are a vital piece of our tourism industry, helping to sustain the well-being of our communities. But Hawaii's natural resources are being loved to death, if you know what I mean, by too many visitors, and will face new challenges with climate change. So another big priority for me in 2022 is the Visitor Green Fees Bill. And no, I'm not talking about raising golf green fees. SB 666 was passed the Senate last session, but died in the House. It established a green fee surcharge of $20 on transient accommodations for the purposes of funding workforce programs and services that promote certain environmental goals. It proposed a 10-year pilot green fee surcharge. It also set up a special fund. So Hawaii's total underinvestment in our green infrastructure or conservation funding gap has been estimated at $360 million annually, which is a major unfunded liability that poses a significant risk to our business climate and economic resiliency. The increased demand on our natural resources, it requires innovative funding sources focused on reversing the decline excuse me, in our ecosystems and the associated risks for our visitor industry and resident community. So as a result, there's growing interest and support in the belief that visitors can and should contribute a green fee surcharge to help preserve our natural resources. This visitor green fee campaign could provide ways to enhance job opportunities in terms of creating literally thousands of green jobs and elevating the overall visitor experience as well. At least 14 destinations worldwide have visitor green fee programs. The green fees are typically bundled with a robust conservation fund and associated management system. It's time for Hawaii to charge fees in order to fund the cost of conserving and managing our natural resources. I mean, it truly is a no-brainer. We should all pay our fair share in protection of our island's beauty and bounty. And then the third priority I'd like to share is sunscreens. The main factor contributing to the decline of our coral reefs is localized pollution, such as sewage, pesticide runoff, and yes, chemical sunscreens. In 2018, I'm proud to say Hawaii passed that landmark first in the world ban on the sale of sunscreens containing oxybenzone and octinoxate that are harmful to corals, other marine species, and to humans. And since that time, scientists from around the world have shown that 2 other sunscreen chemicals, octocrylene and avobenzone, are also harmful to marine and human life. They're absorbed into our bodies, they may disrupt our hormones, and they may cause cancers. In particular, octocrylene has recently been found to degrade into benzophenone, which is a known carcinogen and endocrine disruptor. Another carcinogen, benzene, has been found in other sunscreens. So in order to protect human health and our precious coral reefs, I intend to reintroduce SB 132, which bans the sale in Hawaii of sunscreens containing octocrylene and avobenzone without a prescription issued by a licensed doctor. Last session, SB 132 had passed the Senate, but it died in the House. We're in the process of looking at other legislative remedies regarding sunscreens for next session. So protection of our coral reefs is not solved by just prohibition. It requires leadership, innovation, and a unified partnership of all stakeholders, such as the tourism industry, the personal care industry, and even the apparel industry, to find those solutions. Finding and aligning with solutions that are best for our environment, our communities, our country, and our planet will take focus, it will take desire, it will take determination, and yes, most of all, it will take laulima and aloha. So let me say that there's much more to be done, and with these continued collaborative efforts, it's my hope that we'll get the kind of results that we can all greatly benefit from. And with your all continued support, I look forward to more successes next session. Aloha and mahalo.
Mahalo to you, Senator Gabbard, for that fine presentation and also for your passion and work over the years, again, on environmental issues. We truly appreciate that. Next, I would turn to Representative Lowen. If I misstated you as a senator, I apologize, Rep. Lowen. You also have been a chair of Environmental Committee for some years, and we've worked with you on lots of bills. So many in this group have participated in that with you and are appreciative of your efforts. So I understand that Representative Lowen is going to be sharing her priorities on the screen. So if our tech people can facilitate that, we'll all go to her priorities. And here she is, and I will turn the microphone over to Representative Nicole Lowen.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here on a Saturday morning. And hopefully I had a neighbor who was blasting some very odd music this morning, but seems to have stopped. So hopefully that holds. I am Nicole Lowen. Thanks for the introduction earlier. I won't go into too many details since Ted covered it, but yeah, I chair the Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection since 2019 and was vice chair since 2014, I guess, before that. I'll actually start, I guess, mentioning a couple things from last year. Thanks for highlighting the clean transportation bills. Those were some of, I think, the big successes my committee had. And, you know, we also passed a bunch of really good deal in our admin bills and some climate adaptation bills that Rep. Tarnas's committee was the lead on. So I think those were some of our biggest environmental successes last year. I would say I've put together a list of kind of priority topic areas that are under the jurisdiction of my committee. It's hard to pick priorities so far in advance. It's still a work in progress. There's ideas that will come back that we've had in prior years. There'll be new ideas. There's things that will be introduced for the first time and might not pass, but that first time is a first step. So it's really often a multi-year effort, and the process of legislating is really in large part about rolling with the punches sometimes, and what you think are your priorities might evolve as you get closer to session or during session. So maintaining that flexibility is always important as well. So looking towards next year, one priority area for my committee is obviously looking at promoting renewable energy and reducing emissions associated with climate change, or what is called climate mitigation. And these are some of the bills that would do that we will be considering or have considered in past years. One is fixing the RPS formula. Some of you are familiar with that. I won't go into the wonky details of it. And also accelerating our decarbonization goals. So accelerating, looking at being able to accelerate our RPS benchmarks, setting a new goal. We had a goal for emission reduction that was made in 2007 that set a goal for 2020, but it hasn't been updated. Might be looking at how to facilitate UH and Department of Education from achieving their 2035 net zero goals, which already exist in statute. We'll probably be looking at carbon tax again, not without controversy at times, but an important conversation to consider. And then I also put hydrofluorocarbons on here. These are really potent greenhouse gas. These release really potent greenhouse gases associated with climate change. They are refrigerants, and the EPA actually recently passed rules to phase these out, but we might be able to take some additional action in the state to facilitate that. The next kind of topic area I put on here is energy efficiency. The big one, which is a bill we've introduced 2 years in a row, is to implement energy efficiency measures in state facilities and mandate energy efficient new construction. So this is kind of about the state leading by example. This passed the House, died in the Senate. We will also probably put a bill in to expand on our existing state level appliance efficiency standards. And then I also added this idea of benchmarking for commercial buildings. So a lot of this is focused on the energy use in buildings, which is a large part of our energy use, at least as far as energy off the grid. And then next, when we talk about reducing emissions, but not necessarily tied to the power grid, clean transportation, which we did a lot on last session, is going to remain, I think, a topic of consideration. These are, again, some things we've looked at in the past and some new things, mandating EV-ready new construction. We should be building things now made to last for 50, 60 or more years, so we need to plan for the future. We passed a bill last year to provide additional and sustainable funding to our EV charging system rebate program, and that will provide opportunities, I think, to look at that statute and see how we can expand it or increase the incentives and try to focus on specific areas potentially. Electric school buses, I'd like to try to tackle this. I'm not sure what that bill will look like yet. That is very much a work in progress, but we have a current school bus issue ongoing anyway, and to be able to tie that maybe finding some solutions for our current school transportation problem into electrification and climate change might be a win-win. And then I finally added bans on sale of new fossil fuel vehicles or fossil fuel powered mopeds. And again, those are not without controversy, but I think we'll be seeing versions of those come back. Sustainable tourism, as Senator Gabbard mentioned, green fees is a big priority for me as well. We actually did have a bill in the House version of a green fee that passed the House and then died in the Senate. And I will say that I don't think it's necessarily useful to say this passed the Senate and died in the House, or passed the House and died in the Senate. You know, we know that both the House and Senate have environmental allies and obstacles, and I don't think that it gets us very far to try to cast blame. Like, there's always, you know, different versions of bills that move on different sides, and we're all working together. And the other thing I put on here, kind of tying back to clean transportation, is looking at electrification for rental vehicle fleets, because if we'd like to have our incoming tourists rent electric vehicles sometimes, at least have it as an option, then we need to think about building out that infrastructure, making sure there's chargers at hotels and resorts and tourist destinations. And then I moved on to waste management. As Ted mentioned when he introduced me, we introduced, like, I'm not sure if it was the first time ever, but we kind of brought a lot of attention to our extended producer responsibility bill last year for packaging waste, and we'll be reintroducing that. 2 states this year, Oregon and Maine, passed EPR legislation, which is a big win. And I think will help us with our efforts here. There are some obstacles. I'm not sure that we're there yet in terms of winning majority support in House and Senate to move something like this forward, but I think we need to keep pushing the conversation. And then some other bills that we're considering to go along with that is something that would implement a by request only law like City and County of Honolulu has, but to do that statewide, where single-use straws or utensils are provided only on request and not just automatically. We also are looking at introducing a bill that would require minimum post-consumer recycled content for plastic containers. So this would primarily be like beverage containers, but maybe also some cleaning products or personal care products. And then these percentages would increase over time. So this builds in an incentive for the manufacturers to think about recycling the containers. And then finally, we're working on an update to our e-waste, existing e-waste law, which is much needed, and that can be improved to be more effective and provide better funding to the counties. Wastewater and cesspool conversion, this has been mentioned a number of times. The bills that have been introduced several years in a row now that will come back to next year include requiring point of sale inspection for individual wastewater systems. These are ones that go back to, you know, working on with Ted when he was still at Department of Health, because these have been making the rounds for a while. But I think with COVID and the impact it had on our economy, some of these conversations were kind of off the table last year. And, you know, the cesspool conversion working group that I'm a part of is also getting close to coming out with their final report. So that'll be have recommendations in it and maybe be a starting point for pushing harder on some of these. And then I also included here a cesspool conversion funding measure or some kind of grant program because while we want to convert the cesspools in the state, especially those in particularly sensitive areas, that doesn't come without cost, especially if we're talking about lower income, middle income families. You know, we need to try to find a way to help them with those efforts. And then finally, and I think this is my last slide, just some additional issues. Senator Gabbard already talked about sunscreen chemicals, so I won't go into detail, as well as Green Amendment to the Constitution. Again, we did have a version in the House that I passed out of my committee. And when Senator Gabbard's bill came to the House, we passed that out of my committee as well, but it didn't move beyond that. And then the final one I put on this list was looking at PFAS chemicals in food packaging. That's been in the news a lot lately. I believe Washington State passed a bill to eliminate it from certain types of food packaging where viable alternatives exist, and then to continue studying other alternatives for other types of packaging where there's not current alternatives. So yeah, again, it's just good to be here with all of you. Thank you for organizing this. And again, this is always a work in progress. This isn't every bill that we'll probably introduce, and some of these might not end up going in. So we'll just have to see how things progress as we get closer to session.
Thank you, Chair Lowen, for that presentation and also for all of your work on bills. We go back a long way, and so do a lot of other people in this group with you. Much appreciate your work. At this point, I'd move on to Representative David Tarnas. And we've done the introduction. So without further ado, I would pass it over to Representative Tarnas.
Thank you very much, Ted. And thank you to everybody for being here today to have this discussion. Very helpful, I think. I'm going to share my screen to briefly recap what we were able to accomplish last session. And I'm not going to go through all details on it, but these are the ones that I want to emphasize. You can read all the different bills, but I'm really just going to highlight a few of them. In general category, land use planning for sustainable development, my goal was really to try to incorporate sustainability principles into all of our land use decision making. And part of that, working closely with Rep. Lowen, Senator Gabbard, and also my counterpart in the Senate, Senator Lorraine Inouye, we were able to combine the Land Use Commission and the Office of Environmental Quality Control into the Office of Planning and rename it the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. We also were able to pass a measure that would permit all state boards and commissions to conduct remote meetings without having to have an emergency proclamation. That's going to save a lot of fuel, travel time, and all of that. Land lease policy reform, you can see there's several bills that we moved there. My goal in those bills is to try to improve the capacity of the state government to manage our public lands properly. Coastal land management, sea level rise. These are bills that were the first two were top priority bills for the Climate Change Commission. HB 243 was mentioned earlier, where all state agencies have to identify what infrastructure is going to be affected by sea level rise, and then what's our plan to address it. SB 474 requires all sellers of real estate to disclose to potential buyers that the parcel may be affected by sea level rise. They use the sea level rise viewer in order to do that. So I work closely with the real estate industry to make that happen. Land management planning and working groups. There's a number of different issues that are very challenging, very difficult. And so we formed some working groups in order to move them forward. HB 1352 is basically to do an inventory of all federal lands that are all state lands that are leased to the federal government, and then what their environmental conditions are. So we have an idea of where we're going with these leases to federal government. ACR 102, I want to highlight because we're one of 2 states that do not have a state geological survey. From my experience and my professional experience, I know that this is a very useful agency. We utilize the US Geological Survey a lot in this state, but every other state, except for the 2 of us, that we don't have our own state geological survey. And because of that, we're not able to actually benefit from a number of different federal funding sources that would improve our land use planning. Act 90, it was a bill passed many, many years ago that required all pastoral land leases to be transferred from the Department of Land and Natural Resources over to the Department of Agriculture upon mutual agreement of the 2 agencies. This continues to be a conflict. And so we formed a working group to try to figure out a path forward, because the goal is to really protect the environment and enhance food sustainability. And it's a conflict that some people see between pastoral leases and reforestation. So we're going to try to figure out a path forward that would help to address both of these needs. HR 33, I highlight, that's the Mauna Kea working group. Everyone's aware of the conflict that we have been experiencing for many years now at Mauna Kea. Those who are opposed to the 30-meter telescope protested, and the university is beginning the process to get a new lease on the science reserve on the summit of Mauna Kea. And so we in the House passed a resolution that said we need to look at some alternative management frameworks and to provide a seat at the table for the Native Hawaiian community to participate in this decision making. So that's what we did. We have a working group that includes 3 of the main leaders of the Kia'i, the folks who were protesting on the mountain, and a number of other Native Hawaiians from throughout the state, including legislators, to try to figure out a path forward that honors and respects our host culture and also would be able to properly manage the mountain. I'll move on to marine resource management. If some of you may have noticed, during World Ocean Day, the governor signed a number of bills and said, Chair Case said this was a banner year for the oceans. We were able to move through a lot of bills that the DLNR have been trying to get through for many years. We were able to pass them out, and you can see the list of them here. I just want to highlight one of them, which is HB 1019, which isn't a green fee, but in essence, that's what it is. We call it a blue fee, where basically those customers of ocean recreation businesses would all pay a per capita fee that would go to help fund our Division of Conservation and Resource Enforcement. So it's the beginning, and we look forward to next session when we can address some other green fee proposals. You can see the other measures that I've highlighted here that are very, I think, a good step forward in improving our management of marine resources. Agricultural land management for sustainable food production, very important. You can see the number of measures here that we moved out. I want to highlight SB 489. You know, as we look at agriculture, greenhouses are a big part of food production in a number of different parts of our community. And so we're trying to help make that feasible for our farmers. And so SB 489 actually increases the size of greenhouses that would be allowed to be constructed on property for agricultural purposes without a building permit. These are all prefab structures, so they're all sturdy and they'll stay up. They're not going to fall apart. It simplifies the permitting process for farmers as they build these. I want to mention HCR 163, which is the very end of the investment in processing, irrigation, and agricultural lands. This is a lease, a water lease to the Vaioli Valley Taro Hui. A very important measure, but it's just the beginning. And I hope next session that we can actually look at exempting taro farmers from this whole process of having to get a water lease. I'd like to be able to facilitate that process. Again, food security, environmental protection can go hand in hand in something like that. State parks and forestry management, we did a lot of work for that builds capacity within state parks. adaptive management. They can change rules more quickly when there's rapidly changing conditions. We also strengthened our forest management by providing additional funding for tree nurseries, and we strengthened the forest stewardship program. The last category there, I mentioned protecting native forests and ecosystems. We've provided substantial funding for watershed management and restoration, also to combat rapid ohia death, and we're continuing to work on landscape scale mosquito control. So I'm going to stop sharing here and just mention basically what you asked, what my priorities were for next session. And because we have these 3 working groups that I mentioned, I really want to move forward whatever recommendation is coming out of those working groups. The first one I didn't actually talk about, but it's an investigative committee formed by the House to follow up on the audit of the Special Land and Development Fund. That is the fund where all revenue from public land leases are deposited. And that's the fund that pays for the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands. It pays for the Land Division. It pays for a number of very important environmental protection programs within DLNR. So my goal is to help improve our public land leasing process and to help provide necessary funding for these environmental programs within DLNR. So we'll see what legislation comes out of that investigative committee to improve our management of public lands, and I'll try to move those forward. Act 90 working group, I mentioned that previously. The working group is going to recommend legislation, so I want to move that forward. And then the Mauna Kea working group. Also, whatever comes out of that group, we want to move that forward. There will be a number of other measures that I'll introduce. I'm in regular communication with different stakeholders. I meet regularly with folks who are giving me ideas. I'm bouncing ideas off of them. So we will have additional measures in marine resource management and land use management, and also try to facilitate affordable housing development while still protecting the environment. So I'll leave it at that. Again, I look forward to the conversation today, and I always welcome emails or phone calls. So if you ever want to give me your manao on any of these bills we passed last session or bills that we're going to move forward next session, I look forward to that conversation. Okay, back to you, Ted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Tarnas, both for your presentation and for the bills that you helped pass last year. Especially, I note on the sea level rise, a couple bills there, and much appreciated, because that's an issue we're going to need to get more on top of, both in terms of adaptation, which those bills addressed, but also in mitigation. At this point, we have...
Ted? Hello, Ted.
Yes.
I just wanted to chime in real quickly here, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Before you start, I just wanted to respond to Chair Lowen. I apologize, Nicole, if you thought I was casting blame on the House when I mentioned a few of the bills that died there. I'm not. We work very closely together, and I think most of the people on this call realize that perfectly good bills that you think are going to pass the Senate and the House, and they don't pass, and we still don't know what the reason is. So please accept my apology. I was not trying to blame the House, okay?
Thanks. And I know we for everyone here, we all work together well. I just think it's not so much you, Senator, as there's I think a feeling out there like good bills die in the House. And I think I just try to push back on that, so I guess. So thank you.
Okay.
And thank you for that, Senator and Representative. And I would certainly say that those bills don't die very often. To the extent that they die, those good bills, they don't very often die in Rep. Lowen's committee. It's other committees, perhaps, or other parts of the process. As they both said, there's many steps in the process, and a lot of good bills don't make it, sometimes for no apparent reason. So thank you both for working together with all of us. At this point in the program, we're going to take 15 minutes for question and answers from the people on the call. You can put your questions in the chat, and we'll be reading them off. I'm going to start off with a couple questions just while people are perhaps thinking of their questions. First one is, last year the legislature passed a concurrent resolution declaring Hawaii to be the first state in the country to have a climate emergency, as we previously referenced. Landmark action by that by the legislature, even though a reso, it still has real power. And so my question is, what do each of the chairs think are next steps for addressing the this existential climate emergency that we're facing? What should we do? Let me turn to Senator Gabbard first, if he would.
Well, I think the first thing is do what we're doing here today, and then focus in, get all the stakeholders who are interested in addressing it, and let's talk story, and let's come up with some concrete things to do to address the issue, right? And I think one of the blessings, if you can call it a blessing, of the pandemic that's going on is that we're able to do this. You know, we're able to see each other, and everybody gets together, and let's come up with some ideas on concrete things that we can do. So yeah, we just need to start acting on it.
Thank you, Senator. I should have added, it's not just the people on this call, but the average citizen and what they can do to participate. Because it's not just these people, of course. There's a lot of people out there who are concerned about these issues as well. Representative Lowen, do you have any comments on this question?
Sure. I think, a lot of what we all just presented in our presentations are next steps. And I would say it's important to remember, I think everyone, all the legislators on this call have recognized the seriousness of the climate crisis for a long time. So passing the climate emergency reso, I think, is an important step. It demonstrates that we've reached a level of consensus among the rest of our colleagues at the legislature to be able to pass something like that. It sets an example for other states. It's an important kind of piece of background when we're trying to pass new legislation, to be able to refer back to it and say, the legislature affirmed there is a climate emergency. So all of those things I think are helpful. But I think it's important also to remember, it's not like there weren't plenty of people in the state and in this call who recognized there was a climate emergency, for many years, and have been working on it and will continue to.
Thank you. And Representative Tarnas, do you have anything you'd like to say on this?
Sure. Just so everyone here understands how we're trying to approach this strategically within the House. Representative Lowen really her committee is focusing on mitigation measures. Those are the measures that would work to mitigate the impact of climate change. And so that's within the Kuleana of the Energy and Environmental Protection Committee. Adaptation measures would fall under the Water and Land Committee. So that's why we'd be dealing with sea level rise, coastal erosion issues, seawalls. And so that's how we sort of divide up the responsibilities within the House. Rep. Lowen and I work closely together, but since climate change is such a critical issue, we decided that it was best for us to have both committees working on it in a complementary manner. And so that's how we're approaching it. Thank you.
Thank you. One question that we've got in the chat is, will residents be charged green fees through hotel room bookings, for example? Hawaii residents?
I'll jump in. There were different versions of the bill introduced. I think the two mechanisms to try to capture tourism. We can't charge like a entry surcharge at the border because we are a state, not a nation. But it would be either like a surcharge on transient accommodation tax. So it would be like a lump sum fee, like on the whole hotel room bill, or another approach has been to put a surcharge on rental vehicles. So both of them do also capture aina potentially in some way or another. So that's something to think about when we try to figure out how to craft it. I don't think there's like any perfect way of doing it. And there's also like user fees, like some of the bills that Rep. Tarnas passed this session. You can have user fees for certain destinations or state parks and things like that.
And if I may say that on the Ocean Stewardship Fund, which is supported by ocean stewardship fees, that fee would be charged to any customer of ocean recreation vessels, whether it's a snorkel cruise, a dinner cruise, a dive outing, or whatever, and it would not distinguish between resident and non-resident. So that's how I approach that bill, and that's how it moved forward. Just to let everyone know.
Thank you all.
Yeah, and I just like to add that as Nicole just said, we're totally open at this point. So this is the perfect time. If you have any ideas, suggestions on how this should work out, please send them to us or we can add that into the mix.
I'd ask another broad question, and to some extent you all have answered it a little bit, but to be specific, are there things that the groups on this call who are involved in legislation during session, are there things that they can do and that ordinary citizens can do to help you chairs pass good legislation in the next session? Senator Gabbard.
I'll start off, absolutely. And again, I think going back to what we noticed last session was testify at the hearings, obviously. And so many times, you know, people don't show up. They don't show up to testify, and it really makes a difference, right? Numbers count. When you have 3,000 or 5,000 people testifying in favor of a bill and 10 against it, that counts, right? And the variety of you know, have kids get involved, you know, youth groups get involved, elementary kids getting involved, passionately stating their case, and it's just, you know, it really helps. So I would say that first and foremost is know when the hearings are, and that's all online, and testify, either written or in person, preferably in person, but or both.
Rep Lowen, do you have any comment on that?
I mean, I agree with what Senator Gabbard said. I feel like the state has a really great website for tracking it. And, you know, there are organizations you can get involved with, whether that's this group or, you know, Sierra Club or Blue Planet, et cetera, that will highlight the bills that they're weighing in on and, you know, can help alert you to when to testify and things like that. I would say the other thing that can be helpful is to kind of figure out what you're really interested in and really try to learn about it, so that when you do submit testimony, you're really coming from a place of knowledge and understanding and balance, and not just kind of parroting, this is a bad bill because XYZ person told me so. I think that that can be more impactful.
Rep Tarnas.
Thank you. Yes, I do. If you are experienced watching the legislature and how bills move, they'll go through multiple committees in one chamber, and then they move to the other chamber, multiple committees. So you're speaking, we are representing only 3 committees. Let's say a measure gets a triple referral. That's 3 committees in one house, in the House, and 3 committees in the Senate. So long story short, I would encourage you to make sure you contact your own senator and your own representative from your district and find out, take a look at what committees they serve on. And for example, bills that will come out of the Water and Land Committee sometimes go to the Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee, or they'll go to the Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee. Most bills will go through Finance Committee. So find out if your representative is serving on CPC or Judiciary or Finance, and educate them. You know, a lot of reps are strong supporters of the environment, but they're not well educated about it. I try to educate them, so does Rep Lowen, but I think it's really up to you, it's as constituents, to prioritize this for your own representatives and senators, and look at other committees, not just the environment committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question: where in the agenda for the climate crisis priorities are the issues of the food system and the intensive pollution of methane from livestock producers and manure lagoons from pig producers, for example? Animal agriculture uses a huge amount of water, which is also an issue. How are the agriculture issues being addressed in the climate change agenda? Or how
I can
would
just,
they be addressed?
maybe, are you going to call on somebody and people, Ted?
Let me call on, well, I'm calling you because you're there, but then I'll call on the ag chair too.
Yeah, okay. I only jumped in because, as I reported from last session, we did pass a number of bills that related to agriculture, trying to protect agricultural lands. When they're going through a CPR process, we didn't want them to just turn into residential development. We want to keep them into food production. I'm very concerned, certainly, about the non-point source pollution, and we need to do everything we can to keep the soil on the ground and not lose it when there's a big rainfall or a storm event, because then that sediment goes down into the nearshore water and it helps degrades the reef. So those are things that we certainly need to look at. concentrated animal feeding operations are not very common in this state. And so, we did have a couple of dairies on Hawaii Island that actually aren't there anymore. And so, if properly that's what we have to do, is make sure that they're monitored, they're regulated properly, because we can't have these manure lagoons overflowing because of a storm and all that going into streams into the nearshore water. So certainly a very important issue. I don't have any bills that I'm working on right now, but Chair Mark Hashem of the Agriculture Committee would certainly be somebody that would be good for you to have a conversation with.
Thank you.
Back to you, Ted.
Thank you very much, Representative. And Senator Gabbard, since you're chair of the Agriculture and Environment Committee in the Senate, do you have anything to add? Let me just caution everybody that we need to keep things moving. This is a short Q&A, so please be brief in your answers. Senator Gabbard.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. My focus has been on the fact that, as we all know, importing 85 to 90% of our food and having over 800,000 acres of land that's available for farming. So we need more farmers and we need to be teaching them how to do it, how to farm correctly, how to use fewer and fewer pesticides. And yeah, that's been my major focus. We were able to pass a few bills. I won't go into all of them that really helps farmers that are just getting started, in terms of ag loans, ag buildings, et cetera. But that's my focus. And I'm totally open to any ideas that you have along the lines of the question. Thanks.
Thanks, Senator. Another question, I think I'll have to make this our last given our time. Are we going to start including aviation emissions in our mitigation legislation? These emissions are purported to be equal to at least half of Hawaii's greenhouse gas emissions. Do any of the chairs have comments on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, this is always challenging because there's certain things about aviation that we don't control, that are not under state jurisdiction. And because of that, it's like we could set goals for it, but we may not be able to reach them. But I think the aviation fuel question is top of mind. There's a ton of discussion going on about it. And we did pass a bill last year to provide grants for development of sustainable aviation fuels. Although, to be honest, in my opinion, it's really beyond the scope of the level of investment the state can provide. So I don't know how substantive the impact will be from that bill, but we've been having conversations with our congressional delegation and in my role on the Electricity Advisory Committee for the DOE also about the need for investment from the federal government in sustainable aviation fuels. Because there are a lot out there and a lot being worked on, but they're not quite yet developed to commercial scale. And when there's a viable fuel on the market, then that's when it will make it really easier to bring those emissions down.
Thank you, Representative. We have received a few other questions, which we will pass on to the chairs and do our best to see if they can respond to these questions, so that the people who asked questions today but kind of ran out of time can get answers to their concerns. So thank you for the chairs and thank you for the questioners for those good topics. And the next area is to move to the environmental groups. And we've given you a generous 45 seconds to talk about your priorities. I say that facetiously. Obviously, that's very quick, and so you have to be very quick. But we'll run through the 15 or more groups that are on the call today, and each of them can spend 45 seconds introducing their priorities. Mostly talk about your top priority, probably. And if you wanted to comment on the priorities of the chairs, we can give you an extra 15 seconds, as indicated before. So at this point, let's turn to the various presenters of the many environmental organizations on this call. First up, I believe, is the Sierra Club of Hawaii Island, and Chuck Flaherty. Chuck?
Aloha to our legislators and the participating organizations. Mahalo for this opportunity to kuka and to share Sierra Club Hawaii Island Group's top 3 priorities. They are to protect and enhance a healthy marine environment in state and federal waters of the Pacific Island region, and to grow an independent, thriving, island-based domestic food economy to achieve true food security for Hawaii residents. And finally, to achieve a net zero waste, net negative fossil carbon economy. We look forward to laulima with Kako. And again, mahalo for allowing us this opportunity to participate. And I'm glad to see many of these issues are shared by the legislators and other organizations. Mahalo.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you for keeping it on time. Next up is Faith Action for Community Equity. Susan Gorman Chang.
Aloha, I'm Susan Gorman Chang, Chair of the Environmental Justice Task Force, and our priority is a carbon fee and dividend bill called Carbon Cashback. It provides payments called dividends to all residents of Hawaii, funded entirely by taxes on fossil fuel companies that import or refine in Hawaii. The UHERO study found that a carbon fee and dividend, along with Hawaii's renewable portfolio standards, would result in a 40% reduction in greenhouse gases from 2019 levels, which is crucial in combating climate change, and that giving revenues back to households in equal shares makes most households economically better off. This includes Alice households. And we are also happy to support a visitor green fee bill. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next up is the Nature Conservancy, Anthony Ching.
Aloha, thank you, Ted. I'm Anthony Ching with the Nature Conservancy Hawaii and Palmyra. Thank you to the chairs and the planning committee for putting on this great event today. As you see on the screen listed are our top priorities for 2022, particularly starting with climate. And of course, we're very concerned about the impacts that Hawaii is already seeing. Some of our specific interests are the carbon pricing, Lowen discussed, some kind of mechanism to help get our emissions down, and then also a carbon positive incentive program, which Senator Gabbard had previously introduced, that would help small landowners implement carbon smart practices in forestry and agriculture throughout the state. And then we're also very supportive of the green fee and sustainable tourism. We want to make sure that there are mechanisms to support the conservation of our natural resources, which are the basis of our tourism industry. And then, of course, important funding for our state's conservation programs, which have a massive task ahead of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up is Blue Planet, Melissa Miyashiro.
Right. Aloha, everyone. Blue Planet's policy priorities are falling into 3 categories as of now. We want to focus on strengthening commitments to phase out fossil fuels in ground transportation and also in buildings. And second, we want to codify visitor industry commitments to be part of Hawaii's clean energy future. So that is through the electrification of rental cars, tour buses, ground operations at the airport, and then also setting sustainable aviation fuel targets. And then finally, we want to continue prioritizing energy efficiency, which lowers utility bills for residents and businesses. So that's through minimum efficiency standards for products that are sold in the state, and also things like disclosing costs, energy costs and rental agreements.
Thank you, Melissa. Next up is Surfrider Foundation, Lauren Blickley.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lauren Blickley. Thanks for having us today. We at Surfrider Foundation focus specifically in the coastal zone and coastal areas. So therefore, as ocean goers, beach users, surfers, you name it, we are very concerned about ensuring that our community has clean ocean water and understands if the water is not clean, and we want to improve the public notification and testing while also looking at cesspool conversions. Of course, climate change and sea level rise is also very important. And instead of focusing on the mitigation, we focus on the adaptation aspect. And then also the extended producer responsibility, which we believe would be a really important next step to grow on the local policies that we have at our county levels for plastic pollution.
Thank you, Lauren. Next up is Citizens Climate Lobby with Paul Bernstein.
Aloha, thank you for the opportunity here. As with everyone else, our top priority is ensuring a livable planet. And we believe a necessary policy to do that is a carbon fee and dividend, as explained by Susan Gorman Chang. We're pushing for a national carbon fee with revenues returned to individual citizens in equal shares. Because of this, we're also supporting carbon cashback at the state level. And Carbon Cashback actually does a wonderful job supporting two of Senator Gabbard's initiatives, the green tourism fee and the green amendment will make both of those easier to implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next up is Charlie Ice with the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party.
Mahalo, Ted, and to all of the other participants, and to Faith Action for organizing this powerful potential for collaboration. This, I was going to say this is a full plate that we have, but it's more like a groaning board. And I'm happy to say that all of these priorities that you see here are the top 3 of 12 in our committee. But the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party has 4 standing committees. And I can tell you with confidence that we are going to be supporting this full group, this entirety of all of the priorities that we have seen so far. So thank you so much for participating.
Thank you, Charlie. Next up is Sherry Pollock with 350 Hawaii.
Aloha, everyone, and thank you so much for participating today. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone who's on this call. The UN IPC report made clear that we are in Code Red for humanity and we are out of time. And I ask that if you remember anything about the slide that we have today is that Code Red. We are in Code Red, and the image of this child pointing to the fact that we should be loving water, not oil. Because of our generations in action and not cutting emissions, we created a planetary crisis and condemned her and our children to a 1.5 degree warmer world. And that's why 350 Hawaii's top priority is to do all we can towards a livable climate and avert the worst that scientists predict by rapidly transitioning to energy and transportation sectors that are non-climate harming, truly clean, renewable energy, and then also carbon sequestration, such as through regenerative agricultural practices. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next up is Andrea Nandoscar for the Climate Protectors Hawaii.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you, Ted, and mahalo to our legislators and the event organizers for this wonderful event. The Climate Protectors support a green constitutional amendment to protect our right to a secure climate. We also will support legislation to cut greenhouse gas emissions from electricity generation, ground transportation, and aviation. And we favor regenerative agriculture, tree planting, and bamboo green jobs to sequester carbon by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Next up is the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition with Lisa Bishop.
Aloha, and thank you, committee chairs and event organizers for creating this opportunity for all of us to meet together today. The Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition strongly supports the Green Constitutional Amendment, and we also support legislation to protect corals and other marine species which are under dire threat from ocean warming, from local stressors like reef harming sunscreens, cesspools, and overfishing of reef cleaning herbivores. Thank you again for this opportunity to join you today.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up is Our Revolution Hawaii with Dave Mullenix.
According to the UN IPCC report, greenhouse gas emissions must peak within the next 4 years. We are really in a climate emergency and are quickly running out of time. We can no longer afford to make incremental changes. If we are to avoid inevitable perpetual climate chaos, it's imperative that our legislature do its part to increase Hawaii's efforts to address climate change. We need 3 things. We need a climate action plan, which we currently do not have. We need to transition off of fossil fuels by 2030, including ample EV charging stations. HECO estimates we need about 50,000 charging stations. We currently only have about 1,000. Legislature needs to pass legislation to increase access to EV charging stations. Third, we need to sequester carbon through regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is the cheapest, oldest, quickest, and simplest way to sequester carbon. We need to pass legislation to help our small organic farmers to get onto the land. Finally, I just wanted to thank and supporting the efforts of our legislature. We have 15 seconds for that. We have some 40 organizations with thousands of members and our climate environmental coalition that stand ready to help you pass climate legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave. Next up is the Hawaii Youth Climate Coalition with Clara Ontal.
Hello, Ted. Aloha, everyone. The Hawaii Climate Coalition's priorities were shaped entirely by local youth. Climate justice mapping is a major priority of ours, such as having legislation to include stakeholders from communities impacted by projects, especially those from Indigenous and low-income communities, when making plans for environmental solutions. We urge for a state-level, community-driven climate action plan similar to the Honolulu Climate Action Plan passed last session, that includes a list of programs, policies, and actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We also prioritize environmental and societal restoration with regenerative agriculture and food security. Mahalo.
Thank you, Clara. Next up is the Hawaii EV Association. And
Great,
that's
thank
Sam
you.
Hunt. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Tam Hunt, Hawaii EV. And thanks for holding this forum. And want to first kind of state our strong support for the priorities already stated, and in particular state some appreciation for Chair Lowen's efforts last year and this coming year. And our main priorities are to continue electrification of transportation through school buses, looking also at rental fleets and getting more electric vehicles in those fleets, ensuring more EV-ready new construction, meaning chargers at new construction, ensuring workforces can handle the upcoming demand for all this change in our infrastructure, financial incentives for low and moderate income communities for electrification of various types. Second priority is to reduce vehicle miles traveled, and this means better mass transit, shared mobility, micromobility, and also looking at autonomous transport coming up in probably a few years. Last, looking at the circular economy, and that involves upcycling, recycling of batteries and solar panels, et cetera, making sure we're not contributing to waste issues. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Tam. I think next up is Aloha Aina, Economic Futures. And I'm not sure who's presenting, but go ahead if you're here.
Aloha. Aloha, this is Davis Price on behalf of Aina Aloha Economic Futures. Mahalo for this amazing meeting and the opportunity to share. So our priorities this year are tied to a number of projects that we identified through our community engagement processes over the last 18 months that focus on watershed and environmental resource stewardship and development of agricultural resources. We are hoping that these projects can be considered infrastructural investments that could then qualify for funding through CIP through the CIP mechanism in the state budget, as opposed to nonprofit grants that are administered through GIAs. We also hope to activate a reso that was passed by the Senate last year. We'll probably reintroduce it to be considered by both houses to activate a working group or task force to develop the framework to achieve a circular economy by 2035. And lastly, revising the Hawaii State Planning Act, Section 226-8, which touches on tourism, to include a regenerative tourism framework. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next up is For the Fishes with Inga Gibson.
Aloha, Mai Kako. Thank you for the opportunity, especially mahalos to Senator Gabbard and Representative Lowen for their many years of support for ending the trafficking of our precious reef wildlife for the aquarium pet trade. As many of you know, ending the destructive aquarium pet trade not only protects the hundreds of thousands of animals that are taken annually by the mainland-driven trade, it also helps to mitigate the impacts of climate change when you're looking at coral bleaching and algal overgrowth, and also the concerns with damage and coral injury because of the effects of climate change and increasing storms that are predicted. So mahalo for the opportunity. We hope all of you will join us, and thank you to the chairs of the committees for again considering this very important matter. Aloha.
Thank you, Inga. Next up is Climate Reality Project with Joshua Cooper.
Alo, thank you so much, Ted and Clara and Noel, for creating such an amazing event. And thank you for our elected officials for also coming together to meet with us. Our mission, as it says there, is very clear, but we believe real change comes from the ground up. And we know that a small but committed critical mass of activists can not only transform society, but change the world. Most people know about Climate Reality Project as Al Gore trainings, and we still do those, but we're also much more engaged with fly-ins at the federal level, and we're very excited to participate here at the local. The one last thing I'd say is thank you, Senator. We also support 502 on right to a clean, healthy, safe, and sustainable environment. And I'll stop there for the time so everyone else can speak. Mahalo, thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. And I think we're getting to the end here. We've got one last one, the wastewater alternatives and innovation. Stuart Coleman wasn't able to be here today, I believe. But
Nope.
it's a group. I'm sorry, you there? All right, go ahead, Stuart.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you all for joining today. Last but not least, we have VI, Wastewater Alternatives and Innovations, and picking up a lot of what you all said, we are really dedicated to protecting our water quality nearshore reefs. And we want to do that by requiring conversion of cesspools to upon point of sale. This is when there's a lot of money. This is SB 396, and it can be negotiated. This is a tool that DOH and many others, think is essential to convert cesspools when there's money exchanging hands. And so that's one of our top priorities. We also want to allow for a better kind of public-private partnership where we can allow joint venturing of wastewater alternatives or treatment facilities to work with companies to help do this and help finance projects that the counties just can't afford right now. So like on the Big Island, there's a law that based on a decision, a court decision, kind of doesn't allow for this. So we think this is essential to bring in more innovative and less expensive and more efficient equipment for wastewater treatment. And then we also, you all probably know that there's a ban, a mandatory conversion of all 88,000 cesspools by 2050 to reduce the 53 million gallons a day of untreated sewage that goes out into our groundwater and shorelines. But we need to have earlier deadlines for that so that people don't just wait to the end. So priority areas before then. So mahalo to all of you for joining. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Stuart. And thank you, mahalo to all the groups who presented. We have here a summary of the various words that are used, word cloud, which is kind of a nice way to present the issues and summarize what people were raising today. On a more traditional level, I would say the issues that we've seen that everybody seems to sponsor, that so many groups are turning to, that is mitigating and adapting to climate change, phasing out fossil fuels, encouraging energy alternatives and electric vehicles, and green fees or controlling tourism, encouraging local agriculture and food development on Hawaii, sequestering carbon through regenerative agriculture, planting trees, bamboo, other things, and ocean protection, protecting our coral reefs and various aspects of the ocean that are so important to Hawaii's life. So those are kind of the issues that we see coming out of this meeting that seem to appeal to so many of us. I would say that this meeting today is the beginning of a process. It is not by any means the end of anything. And so I hope that everybody will take the energy from today and work together and figure out consensus in the coming months before session so that we can go into session with momentum for some of the important priorities that we've heard today and pass good laws to protect the environment in Hawaii. And with that, I would thank all of you again and turn it back to Clara Antal.
Mahalo, Ted, for your wonderful job moderating today. And mahalo to Senator Gabbard, Representative Lowen, and Representative Tarnas for being here and leading this discussion today. Mahalo to the environmental organizations for presenting their priorities, and thank you for all of your contributions. And so we will be sending out a recording of today's Zoom, as well as the contacts of the participating organizations who have given consent to sharing their contacts. And so if you have any specific questions for those organizations, you may contact those. Or if you're having difficulties finding the contact to send to specific organizations or legislators, I will be putting my contact email into the chat for everyone to send, and we will do our best to try to get your questions answered if they weren't able to during the event. And so again, want to state that this is just the first step in a process, and we want to continue to work together and build on this collaboration. So now we welcome you to unmute if you want to share any of your reactions to today's event. Mahalo.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, folks.
So does anybody want to state a reaction to the meeting and make any other comment at this time?
Got our hands full.
Chair, I
Let's
would
go.
like to say one thing, and I'm on the Ecology Caucus. Charlie, thank you very much. I thought your presentation was concise, to the point, and yes, we do support virtually every single group here and everything you're standing for. I would like to suggest that meetings like this take place more than once a year, preferably perhaps something in the middle of the legislative session, so we can coordinate if any of us have noticed that we need to give an extra push and we're not already doing it. And perhaps maybe we can make this a quarterly thing, or at least partially, because this is very productive. It means we don't overlap each other, except we support each other. We leave the experts to construct the legislation that needs to be pushed, and then we get behind them. If we all work together in this way, we can get more done more efficiently, in my opinion. I also think we need to let the legislatures know that we are united, we are on this, and we do not accept the concept of gradually we can let this happen, because we know this is code red and we need to act ASAP. And reality says we're not going to get everything passed, because there are still people who would rather have money than air to breathe and water to drink. But united, we truly do stand. So I want to compliment you, Ted, on this, and I hope we can get this going more frequently. Thank you very
Martha.
much.
Thank you very much. Anybody
Hello,
else?
Martha, well said.
Yes, well said, Martha. Anybody want to raise their hands or just jump in if you have a comment? You're all so shy.
Dave Molnix here. I just want to thank all the folks who have been in the coalition. We got last year we got 40 organizations to join together to get climate legislation passed and environmental legislation passed. And it's amazing how hard everyone worked to get this done. And I just want to express our gratitude for you for putting out so much energy and sacrificing your time and your resources to help get these things done. And like Martha said, working together, we can make it happen. And we can do it more effectively by working together. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dave. Anybody else? We're coming up on 11:30, so we'll sign off on time. But
Ruta has her hand up.
Go ahead, Ruta.
Hi, I just wanted to ask what you all see as the next step, because this was very educating, but where do we go next?
So I just want to say that the planning committee is considering another event in January, right after the bill introduction deadline, so that we have bill numbers to attach to these great concepts that have been discussed today. And if you think that's a good idea, say so in chat.
I would add also, thank you, John. I would say also that we're not waiting for January, that there's plenty to do in the next several months. Ideas for drafting specific bills before January. We can share, I hope, with the chairs and with each other and build momentum for particular legislation, as well as for the broad priorities that we've enunciated today. Would anyone else like to make a comment?
Yeah, just that, this is Dave again, just that we are ongoing and we never stop. We're going to have more things happening soon. I don't know what that's going to be yet, but count on it. We are going to be ongoing in organizing.
Marian has her hand up.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just agreeing.
How about Councilmember King from Maui had her hand up.
Oh, thank you so much, Ted. And this has been a great session to listen in on. I really loved hearing the priorities. And of course, I seem to always align myself with Senator Gabbard. So thank you for being here, Senator Gabbard, and your focus on agriculture and energy. I just wanted to make a comment that, you know, when we're looking at things like that, the question about aviation emissions was mine. And we shouldn't ignore, though, that's a huge component to our contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. And just because we think we can't do anything because it's a, you know, the airlines are a federal issue, there are things we can do because it speaks directly to over tourism and the amount of tourism that we have here. So there are things that we can do on a state level, possibly even a county level. I mean, you know, we tried with the moratorium, which unfortunately didn't get past the veto, but it's something that we can't ignore. And, you know, that's one of the problems where we've been going along with climate change, ignoring the things that we don't think we can affect. And that's kind of where we're at today with, you know, with the global problem. So I just want to encourage everybody to keep that top of mind. Thank you.
I don't see who they are. Stuart Coleman has his hand raised. Go ahead, Stuart.
Thank you, Ted. Yeah, kind of building on what Councilmember King and others have said today. You know, the Democrats brought about a revolution in Hawaii. It was a solidly Republican body until Senator Dan Inouye and his crew did this. And with the climate emergency we have before us, has been pointed out, like, we really need to have that same kind of united movement, that urgency. And so I would just encourage you all to talk to your friends about this, get them involved and get them excited about the upcoming legislative session. I think our legislators who are really, you know, on the panel today are really sensitive that, and I think probably more so than other legislators, but they will feel it. If they sense there's change in the air, that these groups are organized and working together, we can do really big things. And indeed, we have to do big things. So I would just encourage us to continue these kind of chats, working together and supporting each other's bills, and really try to make next year and the upcoming years in this decisive decade something that really makes a difference, that we can bring about this revolution that we want in a very peaceful and progressive way.
Thank you, Stuart. Matt Geyer.
Building on what Stuart just said, joining these groups is key. There's a lot of fantastic groups here. They're doing fantastic work, and we all need support. We need ideas. We need participation. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. If you're already a member of one of these groups, consider joining another.
Thank you, Matt. Cheryl Royce.
I just want to share how incredibly encouraging this was to me as a just more or less private person. And it just made me aware of how many other things that I can be doing to help it. And I'm just so amazed and happy at all the things that you guys are bringing forward. And I plan on supporting every one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I want to say you're not just a private person. You've also done a lot of good work on hydrofluorocarbon legislation. And it's a private person who suddenly got excited about an issue through Project Drawdown. You've been a great example of citizen participation. Are there any other comments people want to make right now? We're past time a little bit. I want to thank everybody for keeping this on time, because we've got everybody's time is valuable, and to have this meeting run approximately 90 minutes with only 4 minutes over is amazing.
Ted,
And,
I just want to say that I think Mr. Ha has his hand up. Richard Ha.
Yes, Mr. Ha.
Yeah, I wanted to make a case for geothermal. We're going to be over the hotspot for almost a million years, and the heat is free. So, you know, it's a free one while we're looking at how we're going to do this. And it doesn't give off any CO2 or NOxes or anything.
Rachel Linden, please.
Hi, in that same vein, Richard, I hear you with the geothermal. And another area that we might be overlooking is nonprofits. I mean, I heard a lot of mention about agricultural land and shifting farmers away from pesticides. But at Livable Waikiki, we promote organic land care standards for public spaces, including organic pilot programs for parks. And our public spaces are most definitely a place where we could be carbon mining and carbon sequestering. And I just want to offer that that's a place that we should also be looking and not put all of the burden on the farming community to be sequestering carbon, because we have an asset that we're all paying for, and participating in that would be a great honor for us at Livable Waikiki, and we would like to participate and work with other nonprofits here. So please, I'll put my contact details in the chat. Please reach out to me if that's of interest to your group as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Melody Aduha.
Oh, thank you very much, Ted. And thank you, everyone. This has been a really great presentation, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure we're all ready to go. I guess one of the things I wanted to also discuss was what Councilwoman Kelly King brought up regarding the aviation fuel. It looks like our renewables would be electric airplanes, and it would be capable for inter-island flights. However, we don't have the infrastructure, so perhaps the legislators could also look at creating charging stations at the airport for that reason. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up was regarding carbon sinks with Y and High Rock and all the rest of protecting the oceans. I mean, our oceans are our biggest carbon sink, and if that goes down, then forget it. You know, we're done. So please do protect our coral reefs, protect our aquatic fishes, and everything else. We need to maintain its ecosystem as best as possible. Finally, regarding what Representative Tarnas had brought up, which is HB 1352, Act 93, regarding the military's use of leases and lands, and those that are capable of coming back and reverting to the state, that bill needs to be beefed up. Originally, it included reparations and cleanup in those areas. However, right now the bill is only, or the act is only calling for an inventory and EPA and DOH to discuss about the contaminants and pollution and the debris. But there is nothing for reparation or cleanup or land exchange or land swap or something that would benefit the people of Hawaii. I think that's about it. Thank you so much. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Melody. I think we should probably call it quits at this point. We have had a number of questions in the chat, so many I haven't had a chance to read them all. But we will pass those on to the legislators, and we'll try to get you answers to those, either from the legislators or from the organizers of this group, to the extent we can. Thank you so much to the organizing committee, who did such a great job. There are 6 or 7 of us who've been working on this since June. And the people at Faith Action Community Equity have done a wonderful job in leading on this. And Clara Antal, who's, as I said, a student at Iolani School and is doing a wonderful job representing, I hope, the future. So thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Get some lunch. Maybe get out in the sun. Get out in nature, and let's work together. And see you in the legislative session, I hope. Mahalo.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Aloha. Good job.
Aloha. Thank you.
Everybody,
Mahalo.
thank you.
Hello.
Great job, everyone.
Hello, everyone, for coming.